Hello everybody, it's your favorite West Virginia Space here and DCYA novels. DC's attempt to try to bring a new, younger readership to reinvigorate the comics market, which is currently crashing, burning, doing a backflip, and then driving straight into the H word. But regardless of that, and it wasn't necessarily a bad strategy to try to target a younger audience, but the comics just suck, and you don't have to look anywhere on YouTube to figure that out. Nobody is defending them. And quite frankly, they all pretty much sucked. Just type in any one of them and you'll find dozens of videos taking them down, and which they rightfully deserve, because a lot of them are really bad. But that does get to a question. As far as I know, no one's really talked about them as a whole. Sure, many YouTubers have discussed them, and some of them have reviewed a lot of them, but no one's ever really tried to piece them together as a whole and analyze why they, as a collective group, suck. So this is what I'm going to do today, and try to get to the bottom of why DCYA novels suck. But before I go into my real deep take on this, I want to give some miscellaneous reasons that most of us pretty much already know about. The first one being is the forced politics. I don't have to explain this, you already know this. It has very forced politics that do not benefit the story, especially, or in spite of, when it's about politics. And honestly, it's just not really worth it. If you're gonna have politics in a story, at least be clever about it, which these people just are not. So I'm not even going to dwell on it further, as it's pretty obvious. And before anyone says, well, you just think it's political because it has a minority character in the lead or whatever, my response is, if you believe that having a minority character as a lead character in the story in of itself makes it work political, you're a jerk, and please stop. But on the more interesting topics, at least, is one of them people have discussed is how a lot of the characters seem like self-insert OCs of their writers. Now, this doesn't seem to be the case for all of them, and it's debatable. It could be a coincidence in some cases, but ultimately, I think it's a moot point, as whether or not the character is a self-insert OC of the real person doesn't actually matter, because you can still make a good story with a self-insert. Heck, Luke himself was partially based on George Lucas, so once again, you can do it better. It's just a question of writing quality. Another one I think is kind of obvious that the art is kind of ugly in a lot of cases. Not always, some of them look better than others, but a lot of them do have ugly art. I don't know if it's intentional or by accident or they just didn't care or what, but this is the problem, is that comics aren't handling a visual medium. You want good art. Even some of the old 30s comics at least had a style going for them. Some of these are just ugly. There's no other way to describe it. And I'm sorry, but that's just how it be. And, you know, it's unfair maybe, but just how it is. But those are just some miscellaneous reasons that everyone talks about. Let's get into my real take for today. My real claim today is that the real reason why a lot of these DCYA novels suck is that they aren't actually superhero stories, which sounds ironic because most of them blatantly show we have insert character or we are talking about this character. But yeah, if you actually look at the core, they aren't superhero stories. Now, this gets a bit pretentious, but give me a second to explain myself here. Now, there isn't really a perfect definition of a superhero story, at least in my mind. I know some people will try to use like a dictionary definition, you can, but realistically, at their core, superhero stories are essentially just a subgenre of the action-adventure genre. Some of them lean more into this, some of them are definitely more sci-fi or adventure, while other ones are more traditional superhero. And though the superhero genre is a genre with its own tropes and styles, it clearly exists, at least in my mind, as part of the broader action-adventure genre, which means certain broad tropes that belong to it apply, certain expectations are generally supposed to be met, and certain information is just going to be a thing. There are exceptions, but this is broadly a rule I think most superhero stories fall into, being action-adventure stories. Now, how does this tie back into YA novels? Well, in their cases, they really aren't. Like, sure, some of them you could maybe contort if you really try, but most of them aren't. They're about teenage drama or little personal issues like that, and not actually, in many cases, about a actual superhero, supervillain type plot. And the ones that do often just ham-fist it randomly and then just happen, like in I'm Not Starfire, where the entire story could easily just be about a kid and her really famous mom, until the last like 20 or 30 pages when like, oh yes, we forgot we were in a superhero story, weren't we? Throw in a bad guy. Like, dude, you could even give us some angst about not having powers. Feels kind of obvious, but ultimately, that is what I'm getting at, is that these stories aren't really action-adventure stories, which superhero stories traditionally are. So therefore, trying to make a superhero comic, even for young adults, that that is not an action-adventure story fundamentally is not going to work. And before people say, oh, well, this is meant for younger audiences, so therefore they had to tone down the violence or something. First of all, just look at, like, Superhero Squad. Does anyone remember that show? It's apparently re-airing more on Disney right now. But that's not the point. The point is the Superhero Squad is a literal cartoon taken with Marvel characters that is designed for very little kids in a lot of cases, but it still has a decent story and good action. So what's your excuse? These superhero characters are often very popular with kids. Like, legitimately, they usually are. So the excuse of, we can't have an action-adventure story for our teenagers, then no, you're just wrong. And please stop. And it's not necessarily in these comics that they have personal issues. Some characters like Spider-Man are notorious for having these personal, very human issues to help ground them in the real world. And that's fine. A lot of superheroes even have, like, one love interest or a best friend who's a pretty much normal person to help ground them. And that's fine. Having personal stuff, having these little character moments, or even major plot lines is fine. It's even good in some characters' cases. It's on a case-by-case basis, but ultimately, it's a perfectly fine thing to do. However, these comics are pretty much only about it. Like, I mean, I think the most that has an actual superhero plot is maybe a Nubia the Real One. Maybe, but even then, the superhero element is overshadowed by the political element. And then you get stories like I'm Not Starfire, which literally, like I've mentioned previously, are just a teenage drama story until the last 30 pages, where the plot just comes out of nowhere. And then you get ones like Lois Lane and the You Brought Me the Ocean, where I'm being legitimate here. Yes, events happen with the Ocean that have superpowers involved, but, like, not really. Like, the entire main plot works just fine without it. Like, it could, like, and, like, Lois Lane, I mean, obviously Lois Lane doesn't have powers, but she still lives in a superhero world. You couldn't tell me you couldn't have given her a plot about something involving that? I mean, she lives in Metropolis. Like, there's a lot of weird stuff going on there. Come on, people. And that's my ultimate, but beyond all that, that's my thesis for this video, is that fundamentally, DCY novels fail more often than not because they are not written with the idea of being a superhero story. They're written with the idea of being a drama story for teenagers and not a superhero story, which is kind of a problem when you're writing for a superhero company involving superhero characters trying to bring, and even if you, and this is the problem, they're trying to bring in new readers with this, but, like, even if you did like these stories, you wouldn't like superhero stories necessarily because these aren't superhero stories. Like, it would be like trying to say, hey, I want to get into Spider-Man, or I want to convince people to like Spider-Man, so I'm going to show them gritty crime dramas, you know, that are made in, like, the 60s, and that will get them to like Spider-Man. Like, that doesn't, not how that works. And I think that's important to remember going forward for any kind of, like, future projects DC or Marvel or whoever wants to do. But ultimately, that's just my take. What's your thoughts on it? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I'm right? And ultimately, I'm just curious to see what you think. Please put your comments down below, and I'll see you all next time. Yeah? Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscriber. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.